I've been a night shift nurse for almost 15 years. I've seen every kind of strange thing a hospital can throw at you, unexpected deaths. Patients talking to people who aren't there. Unexplained noises in empty hallways. But what happened? In the winter of 2018, at St. Mary's Hospital in Boston, still keeps me awake. It was the kind of night that already felt wrong from the start. Heavy snow outside, the wind howling against the old brick building. Lights flickering in the ER. The power had been spotty all day, and only a skeleton crew was on duty. Around 2:15 a.m., I was at the nurses' station on the 4th floor, reviewing charts. That's when I noticed a new file sitting in the admission tray, because we hadn't received any new patients in hours. The chart read, Patient William Price, Room 412. Admitted, February 14th, 1968. I frowned. 1968. I thought it had to be a clerical error. But before I could ask anyone about it, the phone at my desk rang. A male voice on the other end said, very calmly, "You should check on him now." The line went dead. Curiosity and maybe a little professional obligation got the better of me. I grabbed the chart and walked down the hall toward room 412. The room was supposed to be empty. It had been for years, used mostly for storage. But when I reached the door, the light inside was on. I stepped in slowly. The storage boxes were gone. In their place was a hospital bed with crisp white sheets, an IV stand, and heart monitor. And lying in that bed was a man in his late 70s, pale, frail, wearing an old-fashioned patient gown. His eyes were open. "Mr. Price?" I asked before I could stop myself. He smiled faintly. Finally, someone came. My heart was pounding. I wanted to call the front desk, but something in his voice, calm, heavy, kept me rooted. "How did you get here?" I asked. "I never left," he whispered. The monitor beside him beeped steadily. But when I glanced at it, the display wasn't showing any vital signs, just a black screen with faint green static. I tried to keep my composure. "Do you need anything?" His gaze shifted past me, toward the doorway. "Bisnad's safe here tonight," he murmured. "They'll be walking soon." Before I could ask what he meant, the hallway lights outside flickered. A shadow passed across the frosted glass window of the door, thin, moving impossibly, smooth. I turned to look, but the hall was empty. When I turned back to the bed, Mr. Price was staring directly into my eyes. His pupils were almost white now, clouded, but sharp in a way that made my stomach knot. "Don't let them touch you," he said. "That's how I die." A cold gust of air rushed through the room, even though the window was closed. The heart monitor emitted a single high-pitched tone, and then the date on the monitor display changed. February 14th, 1968. I took a step back from the bed, my hands trembling. The monitor kept displaying that date, February 14th, 1968, over and over, as if the machine had been stuck in time. My mind raced. Was this a prank? An elaborate setup by some of the staff? But deep down, I knew no one here had the time or the cruelty to pull something like this. Mr. Price didn't take his eyes off me. "He'll be here any minute," he whispered, his voice hoarse but urgent. "Who?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "The ones who walk the hall," he said, glancing toward the door again. "You'll hear them before you see them." When you do, don't breathe, don't move. Before I could respond, I heard it. Faint footsteps in the hallway. Slow, uneven, too heavy for a human gait. The sound echoed unnaturally, as if the walls themselves were carrying it. I moved to the door, peeking through the narrow glass pane. The hallway lights were dim, flickering in that unstable way that makes shadows seem to shift on their own. At first, I saw nothing. Then, they appeared. 3 figures, dressed in outdated hospital gowns, stained with something dark. Their skin was grey, thin as paper, stretched tight over bones. And their faces, oh God, their faces were frozen in the kind of expression you see on drowning victims, mouths open, eyes bulging, terror etched into every feature. They didn't walk like living people. Their heads moved first, twitching toward every sound, before their bodies followed in slow, deliberate steps. One of them stopped right outside room 412. I held my breath, pressing my back to the wall. The figure turned its head toward the door, sniffing the air like a predator. Mr. Price closed his eyes, mouthing something soundless. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, my breath misting in front of me. The figure's hand-long skeletal lifted toward the door handle. My chest burned from holding my breath, but I didn't dare move. Then, just as its fingers touched the metal, a loud chime echoed from somewhere down the hall. A nurse call button. The figures all turned in unison and began shuffling toward the sound. When they were gone, I exhaled shakily and turned back to Mr. Price. "What are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Patients," he said. "On this floor. In 1968, the fire took most of us. The rest, they didn't die right away." A chill ran down my spine. I'd heard about the fire in nursing orientation, how a wing of the hospital had burned decades ago, killing several patients. But the reports always said everyone died instantly. "I didn't," he said, as if reading my thoughts, "and neither did they. But we weren't supposed to survive." Something else came that night, while the flames still burned, and it stayed. The lights flickered again. This time, the shadow on the door wasn't human at all, taller, broader, its outline distorted, like it didn't belong to this world. Mr. Price grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "If it comes in, don't let it speak to you," he warned. "It will sound like someone you love. That's how it takes you." The shadow moved away from the glass, but I could hear it circling the room. That's when the intercom crackled to life above us, and I heard my mother's voice. "Sweetheart, it's me." The voice through the intercom was unmistakable, warm, gentle, exactly as I remembered it from when I was a child. My mother had been dead for over a decade, but in that moment, hearing her felt so real it made my knees weaken. "Open the door, honey. You can come with me now." My eyes filled with tears. For a split second, a part of me wanted to believe. But then I caught sight of Mr. Price. He was shaking his head violently, mouthing the word no. I stepped back from the door, pressing my palms over my ears. But the voice grew louder, not muffled. "Don't you miss me? You've been so tired. You don't have to be tired anymore. Just open the door." The lights dimmed to a sickly orange glow, and the temperature plunged so low my fingertips went numb. The air tasted metallic, like rust or blood. Suddenly, the voice changed. It was still my mother's tone, but there was something underneath another sound. Guttural, insect-like, clicking and chittering between her words. If you open the door, you'll never be alone again. My heart hammered in my chest. I forced myself to turn toward Mr. Price. What happens if I answer it? You won't leave this room, he said simply. The shadow outside the door grew darker, denser, until it swallowed the thin strip of light coming from the hallway. The handle began to turn slowly, metal creaking under the strain. Without thinking, I grabbed the heavy oxygen tank from the corner and wedged it against the door. The rubber wheels squealing against the tile. The clicking grew louder. The voice laughed softly, my mother's laugh, but hollow, warped. Then silence, no clicking, no voice. The shadow was gone. For a moment, I thought it was over, until I realized the heart monitor beside Mr. Price had gone completely flat. Mr. Price. I leaned over him, panic rising in my throat. His eyes snapped open. But they weren't the cloudy, tired eyes from before. They were pitch black. They're inside now, he said, smiling, before I could react. The overhead lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. That's when the footsteps started again. Not in the hallway this time. Inside the room. They moved slowly, deliberately, circling me. I could hear the faint scrape of skin against tile, the low rasp of breathing right at my ears. Then across the room in an instant, as if it was everywhere. At once, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen casting a weak glow in the dark. I had one new message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me, standing exactly where I was in the photo. A tall, faceless figure stood just behind me. My blood turned to ice. I spun around, the glow from my phone shaking in my trembling hands. But there was nothing behind me, just empty, suffocating darkness. Mr. Price's voice came from somewhere in the black. It's too late now. Once they mark you, they don't let go. Bye. I stepped back until I hit the wall, my chest heaving. What do you mean, mark me? I shouted into the dark. Something answered from the other side of the room. Not Mr. Price, not my mother's imitation. A voice deeper than anything I'd ever heard, layered, as if 100 throats were speaking in unison. 50 years, and we're still hungry. The floor beneath me vibrated, a low hum rising through my legs and rattling my teeth. The smell of burning flesh hit me hard, sharp and acrid, like the remnants of a fire that never went out. Shapes began to emerge in the faint flicker of my phone's dying light. They were human, but wrong-halved burned, bodies with skin bubbled, blackened eyes glistening wet in sockets that looked too deep. Their mouths hung open, but the sounds coming from them were not screams. They were invitations. Come with us. I pressed myself against the corner, gripping my phone as if it were a weapon. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button, but my mind screamed, who's going to believe this? One of the burned figures stepped forward. Its movements were jerky, like broken film skipping frames. It reached out a charred hand toward my face. Mr. Price's voice boomed suddenly. Not tonight. The creatures froze. Every head turned toward him. He sat upright in the bed now, his black eyes burning with something that wasn't human. "You'll take her when I'm gone," he said, but not before. Before I could understand what he meant, he grabbed the 4-pole beside him and yanked it down. snapping the line from his arm. The moment the metal hit the floor, the burned figures began to fade, their forms collapsing into smoke that stank of ashdot. The humming stopped. The temperature began to rise, and in the sudden stillness, I heard only the faint beeping of the heart monitor. Mr. Price was gone. Gone not like someone who had just died, but like he had never been there at all. The bed was perfectly made. No forestand, no monitor, just an empty room. I stumbled into the hallway, my legs weak, and ran to the nurse's station. Daniels, the orderly on duty, looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Room 412, I gasped. There was a patient, William Pricey. Daniels frowned. Room 412 was sealed after the fire in '68. Hasn't been used since. You know that I swore at him, tried to drag him down the hall to see for himself. But when we got there, the door to 412 was padlocked, the number plate tarnished with age. Inside, through the small glass pane, I saw only dust and broken furniture. And then, something else, pressed against the glass from the inside, faint but undeniable, was a charred handprint. The next night, at 2:15 a.m., I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's calm voice said, "You should check on him now."